With the recent announcement of Xenoblade Chronicles free and the slew of tidbits on display in the most recent trailer, fans and creators have been theorizing on what the game might be about, as well as what characters might make a grand return. There are plenty of aspects to talk about, such as the potential combat system or the origin of some characters, just to name a few, but I felt instead I would dive into my biggest hope for Xenoblade Chronicles free, which is the involvement of Klaus in the main narrative. Okay, so you might be thinking, the number one thing you want? But Kay, what about the Ardanian soldiers or crazy ice physics? And you know?
That's true. That's pretty true. I mean,
you're done?
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, of course I want both of those, but I hold firm that the return of Klaus is at the top of my list. Now, for those that do not want to be spoiled on Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2 and would like to be caught up on the games, there are definitely going to be some Ionios-sized spoilers in this video, so I recommend coming back once you have finished Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. For those that don't care about spoilers, welcome. My name is K Jewelers, and I hope you enjoy the video. If you like what you see by the end of this video, then I'd appreciate it if you considered subscribing to the channel. But anyways, let me explain why Klaus's involvement is the number one thing I want from Xenoblade Chronicles free. Introduced in Xenoblade Chronicles by means of his power-hungry counterpart Zanza, Klaus was a character with relatively simple ambitions. He was merely a man whose curiosity got the best of him, and he developed a god complex after obtaining the power he so desperately sought after. Zanza was never a fundamentally complex character, but he was an entertaining villain fueled by one of my favorite twists in a narrative. The existence of Klaus, as shown by Alvis at the end of the game, essentially revealed the man behind the curtain, and demystified the world and placed it within the confines of science fiction by rooting it in a world that we're familiar with. Zanza, as a crazed Klaus, did its part for what Xenoblade Chronicles pursued, and that seemed like enough. That was, until Xenoblade Chronicles 2. When the 2017 sequel to this beloved JRPG came out, the lore of Klaus laid hidden within its later chapters, waiting to reveal added lore to the character and the Xenoblade universe in its entirety. Teases throughout the game culminated in a revamped version of the cutscene that played in the original Xenoblade Chronicles, which was referred to as the birth of a universe. I talked about it more at length in this video right here, but I believe that this is the greatest cutscene in the game because it takes the basis of Klaus's character and greatly expands upon it. Most importantly, his curiosity felt genuine because Klaus was written to be a more human character. The hammy, scenery-chewing delivery of his lines in Xenoblade Chronicles was replaced with those uttered by a man that I couldn't describe better than dynamic. And writing him to be so was crucial for how his character was handled not only in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but in the form of Zanza from the original. The existence of Klaus in the world of present-day Alrest developed the character further, showing that Klaus didn't merely become the selfish deity of Zanza, but that entity was merely the more curious, zealous side of Klaus personified, leaving behind the sympathetic, human side of the scientist. In summation, Monolith Soft took a character as surface level as Klaus and converted him into one of the most complex, poignant characters in the series. Yet, if you recall the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Klaus fades away alongside the conduit once Shulk delivers the final blow to the manifestation of his vices. So, how would he reappear in Xenoblade Chronicles 3 then? Well, that's the thing, he doesn't have to. I said earlier that I wanted the involvement of Klaus in the narrative, not necessarily his physical appearance. Sometimes the best attributes of a character are not what actions they themselves partake in, but how their actions affect those around them. This is the same lens that I view death within narratives through. Typically, seeing how a character acts in their final moments and losing their participation in the narrative is really sad. But what really breaks me is how other characters will carry that burden or react to the loss of said character. It's that raw emotion that sparks a reaction within me. Back on the subject of Klaus, his actions might not have directly affected characters like Mio or even Melia, but said decisions might have resulted in a butterfly effect of sorts, which has left the Xenoblade Chronicles free world of Ionios in the state that it is. A war-torn world filled constantly with a thirst for battle, numerous casualties, no world where people would walk forward hand in hand like Shulk wanted. And ultimately, it's a result of Klaus. Whether that's due to Shulk's creation of a new world to undo the sins created by Klaus's dark half, or a lack of stability caused by the disappearance of the conduit and Klaus in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. That is heavy stuff. And what hurts more is that Klaus realized he messed up with Allrest and attempted to atone for it. But Xenoblade Chronicles 3 could mark the somber truth that he can't fully atone for it. Even if he himself is able to come to peace, there are still fragments that are left behind that affect other people. That is absolutely tragic. There are few things that hit me more than a character that, at one point or another, has the right intentions, but is unfortunately a victim of the world they find themselves in. For Klaus, that world is one tied to the conduit. Because of his first interaction with it, the world will forever suffer repercussions, at least for the foreseeable future. What happens at the end of Xenoblade Chronicles 3, we're not entirely sure, but I have talked with a couple people that have said that it might have connections to the biblical story of Noah and leading people to a new place, one free from the vices that were created. Do I think that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is going to be a total bummer? No, not at all. Xenoblade has always tried to balance the heavier moments with those of levity, maybe to a little bit of varying success, but it would be a pretty dark notion on its own that the world is the way it is due to the sins of a remorseful human. I also think that could strengthen the world of Ionios as well as the party's ambitions. Although a dark history lurks behind its conception, Ionios is a physically beautiful world, and the party fighting for peace in that world, carrying on Shulk and Rex's dreams of both creating that world where people walk forward hand in hand, as well as making it one where people can live their lives together with smiles on their faces, it's poetic. Alright, so if he may not physically appear, then how would Klaus come to mention in the narrative? It's hard to say for certain with the limited information we have, but one easy way would be via the theory that Keves and Agnes are fighting over their differing views on Klaus as an individual. Klaus would be the center of the conflict, despite not physically appearing. And I think that would be hollowing, in a good way, that these two nations are attempting to carry on the legacy of a character who died believing they had fixed the world. If this route happened, I'd very much like for the characters to come to their senses or for Klaus to actually step in some manner within the game's final chapter to help resolve the issue as a send-off of sorts. And send-off here actually has a deeper meaning. With the limited knowledge we do have, this might sound strange, but Klaus's participation seems to be a high possibility, and it actually stems back to last year, before we even got the reveal trailer. If you remember the rumors about Xenoblade Chronicles 3 that popped up last year, which actually seemed to be closer to actual leaks with each passing day, they noted that Xenoblade Chronicles 3 would be the end of the trilogy. I want to put this to rest, but this would most certainly not mean the end of Xenoblade Chronicles. They have noted before in interviews that they want to strengthen the Xenoblade brand, and I don't think that just making one game after saying that would be the wisest decision, but perhaps this end of the trilogy could be the conclusion of Klaus's story and all of the worlds that resulted from his actions. In essence, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is the finale to the Klaus saga. With that being said, probably the worst possible outcome, even worse than him not being mentioned, is making his role a footnote with little to no thought behind it considering how significant his actions have been to the previous titles. I certainly do not believe this will be the case since Takahashi is immensely thorough in crafting his worlds and with his previous attempt to develop Klaus as a character. Furthermore, Takahashi had this to say about Xenoblade Chronicles 3. More precisely speaking, we came up with it sometime between the end of development of Xenoblade Chronicles and the beginning of development of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's not something we recently added to the series. If this game has been in the works since before Xenoblade Chronicles 2, then that would imply that 2 was created with the blueprint of Xenoblade Chronicles 3 in mind, and narrative decisions were implemented with the long game in consideration. The biggest of these, outside of the existence of Allrest, would be Klaus's developed character and the connected worlds of Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. It's not a guarantee, but I don't think they would have taken such efforts to breathe new life into this mad scientist without the endgame or possibly the end of the trilogy in mind. Regardless, when it comes to Xenoblade, the narrative and characters are my personal favorite aspect, which is why Klaus's inclusion in some respectable capacity is a personal desire of mine for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. But I'm curious, what do you guys personally think of Klaus? Should he come back, or do we let him rest? Feel free to leave a comment to let me know your thoughts. Also, let me know what you think about these shorter videos. I love the long-form discussions, but it can occasionally be nice to mix it up, and sometimes it's more sustainable for me to get to you guys content this way with everything else going on in life. Anyways, thank you guys for watching and your continued support. I mean, we hit 10K the other day. That is absolutely insane, so thank you so much for that. But anyways, until next time.